Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to another episode of the No BS Human Design Podcast. I'm your host, Adriana, and I'm looking a little bit of a hot mess today because I just got back from another ruck training. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I shared a lot about it on last week's episode. In just 3 weeks, which is like blowing my mind, I am rucking, which is hiking 100 miles for 4 days with everything I need on my back, and we are raising funds for awareness for Wyme and Sherry's house in my local city, helping family with kids who have been affected by cancer. So I've been very deep in training, very deep in fundraising. Thank you so, so much to anyone who has already donated. This is going to such an incredible cause, and I am busting my ass working hard to make sure I get to the finish line. My shoulder has been healing beautifully, thankfully. I have a new physical therapist who's been helping so much. You'll actually hear me talk about my shoulder in this episode and the entire ego death I had to go through after injuring this over a year ago now. So I've been working really hard personally, spiritually, mentally, physically, all of the things above to make sure that my shoulder can go on with this 100-mile ruck. And I feel really good about it. So the timing couldn't be any better for today's episode. I recently met Rachel, and she's another human design expert. She's so much more than that. She is the owner of Intuitively Wild. She's a yoga therapist, an herbalist, a human design guide, and she brings so much to the table. But one of the biggest things that jumped out at me was she shared with me about her eating disorder and how human design helped her heal through that. And as someone who had literally been going through a lot of body shit myself since injuring my shoulder and not being able to exercise in the same way that I always liked to, this hit really home for me. So I do not believe it's a coincidence that she is on right now as I am approaching the pinnacle of my training and moving into this ruck. Rachel is here sharing all about body image, eating disorders. We both looked at our charts and compared what we believe was or is even currently a big cause of emotional eating, body image struggles, eating disorders in general, binge eating, all of that within our human designs. And it can be triggering. So if this feels a little heavy for you, but you still want to listen, remember to take breaks, tap, do breath work, whatever feels really good for you to help you move through this. But definitely take notes, refer to your own chart, see which one or two pieces really jump out at you right away, because I think this is going to be a game changer for a lot of women. She said that right in the beginning, we don't know any women who haven't struggled with something with eating or body, because that is unfortunately the society that we live in. So let me introduce you to Rachel. She is the creator and the owner of Intuitively Wild. It's a lifestyle brand for everyone and anyone seeking to better understand themselves. And as a human design guide, an herbalist, a yoga therapist, she has studied with the best teachers all over the world in each modality, and has most recently finished her herbalism apprenticeship with her mentor in England. She's very impressive. She's got a beautiful, wild spirit that really feels grounding when you hear her speak. I know you're going to love her, so be sure to connect with her after. Of course, take lots of notes. Let her know what felt really good for you, or if you have any other questions on anything that she said. I know she is so open to talking to you about it. Okay, beautiful. I will stop yapping so we can get right into the episode. Welcome to the No BS Human Design Podcast. I'm Adriana Keefe, human design coach and motivational speaker. I went through my quarter-life crisis in my 20s and had to learn how to navigate through finding what I was meant to be doing with my life. I refused to believe in the culture that said we were all meant to have the same path and boring careers until we retire and die. And along my journey, I found human design, a system that reveals your energetic blueprint, showing you where and how to access your body's consciousness and how to live as your true self. Human design changed my life, so I started sharing it with others and changing their lives, but we were all finding the same problem: a lack of resources that explain the system in easy and useful ways. So I created this show, where we dive deep into the lessons of the human design system without the BS and the noise you find on the internet. Listen in for lessons in human design, finding your purpose, manifestation and spiritual practices, human design within business, and so much more. We connect with other experts in the human design and spiritual realm in a refreshingly honest way to help you find your way along your spiritual path and live this life with intention. It's time to let go of the societal expectations of being and let yourself find abundance through being uniquely you. Let's get started. Okay, I am so stoked for this conversation because the last year I have had, I would say, major ego death and rebirth around my body and injury and mental health. And so naturally, I asked the universe, Sky Daddy, whoever's up there listening, to send me more resources for body image and for my mental health around my physical being. And then someone landed in my inbox. It was like not that long after, talking about mental health and body image and body everything in relation to human design. And I was like, of course, this gets to be this easy. I love this so much. So now I have Rachel. Thank you so much for being here. I forgot to ask, is it Levine or Levine?
Levine.
Levine. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Introduce myself. Well, I am a 5/1 emotional manifesting generator, and that sums up a lot of who I am. I am an herbalist, a yoga therapist, a human design guide. I'm a writer. I love to travel. I'm a dog mom. I guess those are some labels that I identify with that I think sum up a short clip of who I am.
I would say so. I feel like I can read a lot about you just by that. And what's your top 3 in astrology?
I'm a Virgo sun and moon and a Scorpio rising.
Oh yeah, double Virgo. Nice. That must be fun against the Scorpio.
Again, it sums me up pretty well, especially if you put in my Venus and Mars in Leo. That's me.
Nice. I'm a Leo rising, so I have a soft spot for anything Leo. I love that so much. And then you also study and teach human design for a living, among many other things. So when I'm talking to you about human design, I want anyone who's listening to understand I'm talking to Rachel as a fellow educator. So also very knowledgeable in human design. A lot of what we are going to talk about, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see we have both of our charts lined up here for you to be able to visualize everything we're talking about. And as with anything with mental health, we use human design. Well, she's actually the only other person I've ever met besides me who uses human design for mental health. But we use it as a tool. It is not the end all be all. And everything that we're going to talk about today, for example, around body image, what we find in our charts that are pieces of how we can see we struggle with certain things, that is not a human design system finding. Like this is not, if you're a manifesting generator, you're going to struggle with body image. That's not a thing. But what we can do is look at our charts and figure out what parts of us we can use to identify where we're struggling, what our shadow is, and how we can decondition and find healthier ways to move through the energy of that. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Rachel, before we dive in?
No, I think that's so well said and so important to emphasize, and something I tell everyone when I'm talking to them about human design and mental health, because I found human design in the midst of my recovery journey. I'm in recovery for an eating disorder. And so it helped me connect the dots and fill in some spaces. And I'm grateful I found it near the end, or when I was already immersed in healing, because I didn't rely on it solely. And I think that helped it be really beneficial and impactful for me.
That is so true. Absolutely. Okay. So speaking of that, how did you start to find human design and identify the fact that you could use it to help with your mental health? Or did it just kind of happen?
A little of both. Well, I first discovered human design years ago, before I entered recovery. And it was just, I've always been into spirituality and all these different, astrology, all the different things. And so I found it when I was in college and I was immediately interested, but then it kind of took a back seat, forgot about it a bit, and it came back around a couple of years later. And that's when I became fully immersed and got certified. And my one line just went real deep right away. And I started to realize how much it was impacting my mental health when I realized that learning about my human design was allowing me to accept myself and allowing me to understand myself on that deeper level that enabled me to work with myself instead of against myself, and to find these specific tools and ways of healing and living and being that were right for me versus anyone else.
Mm. And I don't know why this specific question is coming up, but I feel like there's a first line out there who really needs to hear this. When you're talking about going down the rabbit hole and being that investigator researcher, I actually see such a, I don't know if link is the right term here, with that and mental health, with constantly going down the rabbit hole and almost like to a stressful point. So how do you see the line one from your own, since I'm not a line one? So from your personal perspective, how do you identify when you're going too deep, when you're shadowing versus letting it be light and fun and easy?
100%. This has been huge for me, actually. I have to discern when I am enjoying learning and
Mm,
when I'm still curious about it and when it's interesting for me versus when I'm forcing myself to keep going because I think I'm lacking. And the biggest difference is when I'm holding myself back from sharing something because I think I don't know enough yet, or I'm not enough of an authority yet. If I feel like I'm lacking in some way. And being, I've spent years studying all these different modalities that I work with, and it still takes effort for me to push myself to be confident and share and to be like, I know what I'm talking about. I've studied, I know enough to share and to help people. And yes, I could still keep learning and keep following that curiosity and that joy that I get from researching, while simultaneously being confident in what I already know and sharing it with the people who are meant to hear it. So it's really learning from a place of excitement and sharing from a place of confidence versus learning from a place of lack and holding yourself back because you feel like you're not good enough yet.
mm. And I just want to point out that you also have a defined heart, because in a lot, when I first started going down that rabbit hole of human design, there was so much about like open center vulnerability and strengths of having a defined center, and everything I read about the open heart was like everything you're saying, like you'll struggle, right? But you have a defined heart and you still can fall into the same struggles. And that's something that I share over and over again, because I think it's such a misconception in the human design world. It doesn't matter if you're defined or undefined, we can have very similar shadows and struggles. So I'm curious how you lean into a little bit more of the feeling confident, like any tools that come to mind that have helped you step into that.
Yeah, well, one, I completely agree. When I first was learning about human design, they said someone with a defined heart will always be confident, have that
Yeah.
consistent drive, and I'm like, excuse me.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is that I do have that consistent willpower and desire for what my heart is invested in and devoted to, but that can turn me against myself too, because it can also, push me towards things that aren't right for me. And so leaning into the confidence is really getting clear on what my true heart desires are, what my intentions are, what my values are, and putting my heart and my motivation and willpower into that versus, again, putting it into the things that aren't in alignment. And for example, with my eating disorder, turning towards exercise too much and having that willpower and drive to show up all the time for that. And then taking a step back and being like, this actually this isn't serving me. This isn't in alignment for me. And so where can I redirect this energy? And that distinction is really important. And for me, it does come back to getting clear on your intentions and your values and your devotion.
I am obsessed with the word devotion lately. I don't know what it is, but I'm just like
Me
devotion
too.
over discipline, desire over discipline. And I just keep going back and forth between the two. I'm like, no more burnout. I'm so like devotion and desire over discipline all the time. That
Oh
was
my
really
God.
good.
It's like you were in my head. That's been a huge shift for me because discipline has always been my thing. I
Yeah.
was always praised for being so disciplined and so routine oriented. And now I'm saying, no, I'm devoted to things.
Mhm.
And instead of routine, I've turned to rituals, and the shift in the language changes everything.
Oh, right. Weren't you in dance?
When I
that
was
you?
younger, yeah, growing up, I was a competitive dancer. I stopped in the beginning of high school, but my whole childhood I danced. Yes.
Yeah, because you see that. I mean, I was a dancer too, not quite like a ballerina, but my friends who were ballerinas, that you see so much of that discipline leading to eating disorders and other body image issues, and that industry has really struggled. Okay, so you are in your own journey, just kind of finding human design, and then how do you start to recognize or implement it with your mental health?
So in so many different ways. Like I said, the underlying factor was just getting to know myself and how I functioned. So I could look at when I was feeling overwhelmed or anxious or had all these ruminating thoughts. I could understand that maybe that's because I have an open head and I'm getting really bombarded by, which I'm sure you can resonate with,
Oh,
having
God.
a
It's literally my email the other day was all about that.
completely undefined
Yeah,
open top
it's
centers.
rough.
Yeah, yeah. And my sun gate is actually in my ajna, and so there's a lot of activity going on there for me, and it just can be constant bombardment, and I can be very heady and critical in my mind. But so looking at my open centers, I guess I'll say my top two centers, my open identity, that's getting to know my open G center. That's been a big thing for me. And then understanding my defined centers. It's like I kind of unpacked my chart and compared it to how it's unfolded for me in real life, and seen what the shadow and the higher side of all those components are, and how that's impacting me.
Mm, yes, step by step, little by little. And that's one of the biggest things that, again, will drive me nuts is we can go down the rabbit hole of just literally trying to learn all the things, but we never slow down to actually integrate. And then you wonder why nothing's changing. So if you were to just start one center at a time, or just learn your type and strategy, just learn your authority, and then really peel that apart. It's hard for an MG to do that, but that's really the best way to do it in order to actually see change, especially in mental health. And then I wish I had pulled up the original email that you had sent me, because I am pretty positive you wrote in there body image or something around body something, which I was just like, holy shit, like you've got to be kidding me. So take us on that journey, sharing as much or as little as feels comfortable for you.
Yeah, so I've struggled with an eating disorder for a large majority of my life, to varying degrees, and it's taken different shapes and forms. And for a long time, I was very unconscious to it, and I didn't get support for it until it had been festering for a couple of years. But it's been a huge part of my life, and I am very well into my recovery now. It very proud of where I'm at in this moment, but it's still something that I move through, especially regarding body image and the perfectionism and the rigidity and the control that is underlying what the behaviors were supporting. And so I have finding the tools to understand myself better and understand what my eating disorder was doing for me, how it was serving me, what it was protecting me from. That's been huge in my healing, and human design has been one of the main tools for that. I mean, I can go into detail about specifics in my chart, but I'm so grateful for human design and what it's given me to support my body image journey in the sense of understanding myself and working with the root of where that's all coming from.
It's just so interesting looking back on. I never knew. I mean, I think I knew. I knew, but I didn't want to admit that I had body image issues or body issues, whatever. I had binge eating, like all these issues, right? I remember in high school, I would just like go through bouts of anorexia just to hope I would lose weight, or bouts of taking like laxatives, like that kind of, like, it's so messed up what we would do to our bodies. And I had never identified with having an eating disorder or body image issue or whatever. But then last year, when I literally like ripped apart my shoulder at the gym, that was an entire wake up call, because I had a totally, like, my identity had to shift in that moment, because I could no longer use my shoulder. My arm was unusable for 8-9 months in total. And still, still in PT right now. So I had to do a lot of ego work. And like, what does this mean for me? If I can't exercise in the way I want to exercise, what does that mean? And I went through a lot of struggles around how I looked in the mirror and gaining weight. And I was just like, oh shit, I've really got to work on this now. It was like right in my face. I was like, I don't wanna, but I know I have to. And then when I had asked you to send me some details about what you see linking your design to your body issues, I don't even like using the word challenges, I would say. And I'm going through that, and I'm like, check, check, check. Like I mean, you have a lot of connections you've made here, but I have probably like 3/4 of them. The biggest being emotional authority. I just did an episode, maybe 3 episodes back, around there, with Jess Bubico. So if you're looking for it, go a few back with Jess Bubico. And she's another human design educator. And she wrote a children's book all about emotions and really allowing kids to honor their emotions. And when I've talked to her, I cried a lot, and I was just like, man, could my life have been so different if I knew it was safe to have emotions, if I didn't put my emotions into eating or drinking wine, drinking in general, which I can still find myself doing. Like, I'm bored, I want to eat, or whatever it is. I'm sad, I want to eat. And it's just, I think my world would have been so different. So is there anything else you want to share on the emotional authority with that?
Yes. Well, one thing I do want to say is that I don't know one female who hasn't had some sort of disordered relationship with their body, with food, with exercise. And a lot of people don't realize it because society normalizes it. And much of what is disordered is considered healthy. And it's really heartbreaking to me. And it's one thing that has made recovery challenging, because I always say I'm not recovering into a healthy world. I'm recovering into a disordered world. And my goal is to not go back to that normal. It's to find what is truly healthy for me. And I want to say that because if you are questioning if there's any part of you that thinks that listening to this, you have some sort of struggle with food or body or exercise or anything like that, I highly urge you to look at that, because even if someone tells you it's normal, it tells you it's healthy, or tells you it's okay, it's probably not. And there's a better solution that could really shift your whole life. Because I spent a lot of my life thinking I wasn't sick enough or X, Y, and Z. So yeah. I really want to say that. And then when it comes to emotional authority, absolutely. When I was younger, I would cry pretty easily. I would cry when I was overwhelmed, or when I was stressed, or when I was trying to talk about something that was uncomfortable for me. My emotional center is connected to my throat, and that was a huge unlock for me, because I had this moment when I was younger, when I would try to talk to my dad about anything, really. I mean, I'm very close with my dad. Don't want to throw him under the bus, but I would start crying when I was talking, and he would say, I can't talk to you when you're crying. Come back when you're not crying. And I couldn't get the words out without crying. And so I just stopped talking about things that would make me cry, and I stopped letting myself cry. And I went through years where I didn't cry at all. And I also didn't get vulnerable with people. I didn't let myself use my voice. And then as I started going through recovery and I was in treatment, I started talking more, I started crying so much. And I had to make peace with my emotions and let myself be emotional. I also had to make peace with using my voice to express my emotions and letting that be okay. And, I had this moment where even, I'm much older now, but when I said to my dad, I want to talk to you about these things, I want to open up about these things, but you have to be okay with my tears. And that was really healing for me. And so learning to embrace all of that for myself has deeply healed something for me. And I think that if we give ourselves and others permission to express our emotions and be emotional beings, then a lot of our dis-ease will be healed, not even just body image stuff, because we're not stuffing things down. We're not shutting down our emotions. We're not disconnecting from our bodies and what they're trying to tell us through our emotions. It's like we're trying to shut down all those signals, and that permission to just let it all flow through us is huge.
I totally used to wear the fact that I didn't cry as like a badge of honor. Like nobody can get to me, like nothing phases me, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago that I started crying again and actually letting myself cry. In Florida, we went to Florida in February. We went to SeaWorld, and at the dolphin show, I cried 3 times. Look, I'm gonna cry just thinking about it because I just love it so much.
Oh, I love that so much.
That we both start crying over dolphins. But yeah, I'm just look at my body capturing this moment. That presence feels, oh, I'm just getting full body tingles. That presence with the body, with the emotions, with the moment, you can't buy that. And now I see where I used to, or I still, I'm not going to say I'm over this. I can still struggle with this. When I'm holding in emotions or energy, when I'm not actively releasing, I tend to turn to food. And if it's not food, I turn to over exercising. It's one end or the other. So with that defined solar plexus, if you guys are watching on YouTube, this is the solar plexus. This is what we're talking about with having the emotional authority. It can feel like a lot of emotions, and not expressing them the right way leads to unhealthy habits, whatever those habits are for you. Okay, let me look back at your notes here. Let's dig into the 5-1 profile and how you see or saw that connecting to your personal body image struggles.
Well, the 5 line, I'm not sure how much listeners know about it, but there can be, when the 5 line can have a projection field, is what people call it, in the sense that other people project things onto you that may or may not be true or the full truth. And I really noticed that even before I knew about human design, I realized that people saw me in a way that wasn't the truth, the totality of who I was, and sometimes wasn't even who I was at all. And I felt like I couldn't live up to their expectations. People would place me on a pedestal, and then I would disappoint them because I wasn't who they thought I was. And that led me to wanting to control how people saw me. And I felt that if I could control my outward appearance, then I could control how people saw me, and I could be more understood and I could be what people wanted me to be. And along with that, I kept people at a distance because I felt like if they got too close, then they would see too much of me and I wouldn't be able to control what they were seeing and what they were perceiving. And so that isolation really allowed the eating disorder to fester and allowed me to kind of be in this bubble alone that I was creating for myself and to not get close to people. And so the 5 line really led to the control and the perfectionism, and also wanting to live up to expectations and be this perfect person that people were perceiving me as. And then the 1 line, I mean, I think we went into this a little bit in the beginning, but that was all about, again, the perfectionism and not wanting to share my voice, not wanting to share my thoughts, my ideas, and led me to shutting things down. And so it was really, I guess, insecurity, like not wanting to control how people perceived me and being insecure. And that led me to wanting to control my body.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Not a good, but like that's yes. Like a mic drop moment, that one. Oh shit. For sure. It's funny. My husband's a 2-5. He's totally cool with me throwing him under the bus on the podcast all the time. And I'm like, check, as you're talking about the 5th line. I'm like, for sure. So I'm probably going to send this to him to listen to. The next one that you mentioned that I found totally fascinating, because this is well, maybe more resonant than fascinating, because this is one of the things that I actually did link for myself when around my own eating was your variables, your arrows. So if you guys are watching, these little arrows up here are known as your variables. We won't go into too much depth because there's a lot of fucking depth in the variables. I'm not even like I go to my friend Crystal for variables. I'm like, tell me more about this. But left overall is, quote, more masculine, more structured, more routine. And then right facing, Rachel has 1 right facing. I'm a quad left, is more passive, quote, feminine, fluid. And so you had also noted that mostly left arrows. Why am I talking about Oreos and arrows at the same time? Need rigidity and routine and structure. And that's something I noticed for myself. I was like, well, I do really well when someone gives me an eating plan, but my man-gen self gets so fucking bored of the same eating plan that I fall off, and then I feel like nothing ever works for me. So I'm still working on that one. Haven't found one that actually works well for me. But when you give me a plan, I'm like, I got this and I feel great. And then when I don't have a plan, like I could not be an intuitive eater. That can't happen for me. So I'd love for you to expand on that for yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, you summarized the basics of the left and right arrows well. I am someone who thrives off routine, who thrives off of consistency and structure in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas of my life. And so that allowed me to hone in on my exercise routine, how I was going to eat, when I was going to eat, and really stay consistent with that. I mean, this also goes back to that ego center, the heart, the willpower, like I will do this and I will stay consistent here. And that is a beautiful thing in so many ways, but it's about using it, again, to work with yourself instead of against yourself. And like you were saying, there's a lot of details and depth to the arrows. I mean, there's a new layer I discover like every day.
Oh my God.
The first, the first arrow, the top left arrow, speaks to your digestion. And I'm a calm digestion, which means that I do well when my environment is calm and grounded and I feel comfortable. And I've noticed this so much, even when I was younger and when I was at the height of my eating disorder, I could only eat when I was by myself or when I was with my mom, like the person I feel the most comfortable around. Otherwise, I completely shut down. And still to this day, I digest better, not only food, but information when I'm in an environment and around people who I feel comfortable with. And knowing that about myself has been really helpful because, one, I have an understanding around it and I can express to the people around me why I might be feeling anxious or unsettled or ungrounded, and advocate for my needs. And then also push past it and be like, okay, I know I'm feeling a little uncomfortable here, but I can still eat. Like, it's still okay to do this right now. And that's been really helpful for me as well. So that's one more detailed example.
And it's funny because I'm calm too. We have so many similarities in this. If you guys are looking at a chart that was pulled from my website, you will see digestion and it will say whatever it is next to it. Like, we are both calm. It's also the number 4 in the upper left. And I will say, for me as a mom of 3, when I heard that I was calm digestion, I was like, how in the world am I going to eat a calm meal at the table with 3 little kids? And I will tell you, there's of course there's hacks. Like, some calm digestion people I know actually eat their dinner in the kitchen while they're prepping it. And then when they sit with their kids, they're just there and present. That's not my ideal. I'd rather eat dinner with everyone. And I found that the more I've naturally started regulating my nervous system, the more I can release control at the dinner table and just be. So if you are calm digestion and you're like, oh, I would love to actually have a calm meal, like, look at your nervous system. If you can't eat alone, if you have kids everywhere, if you've got a newborn breastfeeding, the more you regulate your nervous system, the more you can relax into what you can't control. And that's been really helpful for me. Like, I see a difference in the morning when I wake up and how I feel. So just wanted to add that little nugget there.
Yeah, that's huge, actually. I really love that. And that's something that I've worked on with it myself and that I work on with all my clients, is regulating our nervous systems. Because once you have that sense of safety and groundedness within yourself, and once you know how to tap into that, regardless of where you are, then the external doesn't impact you as much. Like, that you've got your own back no matter what's going on.
Exactly.
So I love that. I love that you said that.
It's a gift for anyone in any situation, really, but especially someone who needs calm.
Yes.
Now this one, I obviously can't really identify with, but you talked about your open identity center. So this is your G center, this beautiful little diamond in the middle. It may or may not be my favorite center, but we don't play favorites, right? So I'd love for you to explain a little bit about how you saw your open identity center coming into play with your body image and mental health.
Yes, this was a big one for me. So having that open identity center, and also being a manifesting generator and Scorpio rising as well, just this constant transformation and evolution and growth, and, moving through things quickly, and kind of having this lack of sense of identity and sense of self, especially when you're younger, and you're just figuring out who you are and going through a lot of changes physically, emotionally, maybe environmentally. There's just so much going on, I mean, in life always. And so when I first turned to my eating disorder, it felt like I had found a sense of self, an identity. Like, I became the healthy one. I became the disciplined one. I started running and going to the gym all the time. That became my identity. It became who I was, the yogi, like this, all the things. And I really latched onto that. And as I moved through recovery, I had to let go of those attachments to those identities. Like you were saying before, like a huge ego death, and being okay with not putting myself in those boxes anymore, maybe not knowing who I was. Through recovery, I had to let go of a lot of who I thought I was. And same with my body. Like, I've had to let go of what I thought it looked like, what size I thought I wore, how I thought I had to dress, and all these things that made up the identity that people saw me as. And that was huge for finding peace with my body and with myself, and saying that I'm an ever evolving person. My open identity, being a manifesting generator, I don't fit into a box. I can't label myself and say, this is who Rachel is, understand me, like, know me through this identity. I've really been working hard to detach myself from any and all labels and identities. And when I do label myself as something or declare myself as something, asking myself why, and what that means to me and what that attachment is. And if it's useful for me, if it's helpful for me, and if it's important to me. And knowing that it's going to change, because again, the eating disorder, the body image control, like controlling the body, a lot of that was to try to prevent change, was to try to control. And that open identity, I'm always changing. And I had to learn to be okay with that.
And it can be such a gift when you
Mm-hmm.
figure out how you want to use it. It can be such a gift. Like you can fit in anywhere that you need to or want to. But of course, there is the falling too far on that side and then kind of losing yourself. So that was an interesting one for me. But I mean, having not only the defined identity center, but it's also like my vocation. There's a lot of pieces of it that are very prevalent in just my everyday life. And so for me, it's like hard to conceptualize not knowing who you are every day. Like, you know who you are, but it's just so weird to think about because my husband has a full open G center as well. And he talks about, what the fuck, who am I today? Like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm just like, that's so weird for me to even think about. So it's awesome to hear other people's perspectives. See, this is why I have conversations and I don't just teach based on knowledge because I can't teach that.
Yeah.
And then, touch on your identity center gate being 46. That one's definitely a lesson that you were here to learn, huh?
Yes. Gate 46. It's, as you can see, the only gate
Oh
in my
yeah.
open
And it's in your moon.
identity center. It's in my moon,
Oh,
and it's in my Mercury. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. So it's not only about my motivation and my why and how I feel, but it's also about what I'm here to talk about, what I'm here to share, what I'm here to teach. And Gate 46 is all about loving being in a human body and being fully alive, not how your body looks, but how you feel in your body and enjoying being human. And I feel like my eating disorder served as a way to kind of disconnect me from my body and disassociate from my body. And, I've had a very existential person. I mean, this goes back to the open identity center of like this constant existential crisis of who am I? And I've had to allow myself to be a human in this body and to find joy in that. And then to allow myself to talk about it. And that's one reason I think I'm so passionate about sharing about this and helping other people move through this, because I think I was meant to, I guess.
Honestly, like, thank you for sharing your voice on this, because now that I'm realizing or seeing that it's in your Mercury, I'm like, of course she was supposed to be the one to come on here and talk about this. Because I mean, of course you were, right? So thank you for actually being vulnerable enough to share your experiences and sharing everything that's come up for you, the good, the bad, all of the in between, because that's literally what you're designed to do. But it can feel scary to do that. It can feel scary to be like, yeah, I busted my shoulder and I couldn't look at myself in the mirror for months. When we feel like we're supposed to look a certain way or be strong and powerful or whatever, it can feel really scary to come out about that. So kudos to you for being open and talking about it. Like, I didn't even have to force you to talk about this. You were just like, yeah, I can share about that. I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I have my own podcast, and the main reason I started it is because I want people to share their stories and their voices to take away the shame. I think when we can start to talk about things, it takes away the secrecy and the shadow, and it shows us that we're all human, we're all dealing with these things, and there's no need to feel ashamed. And talking about my journey, my eating disorder, my recovery, my path, I'm open about it now because it is what healed me. I mean, being open about it and getting help is what saved my life. And I think, and I've just seen the impact that it can have when we share our stories and our vulnerabilities.
1000%. I resonate 1000% with that. The last two that I want to touch on, one that I feel like it should have been one of the first things we talked about is obvious, like the defined sacral. And you wrote, was told that life wasn't allowed to be directed by my joys. 1000% for that one too. So what else would you expand on with that?
Yeah, I mean, even if it wasn't directly, I think most of us have gotten the message that, or I don't want to speak for anyone else, I'll speak for myself. Directly and indirectly, I got the message that to be successful, you have to have some struggle, that your pain means that you're working hard enough. That means you're proving yourself, and that I'm not good enough for it to just be easy. Like I haven't earned it. I haven't worked hard enough.
Yep.
I haven't struggled enough. And so I felt like if I wasn't pushing myself to the brink, if I wasn't using up all my energy and, working so hard that I was dragging myself at the end of the day, then it wasn't enough. And especially, I have all 4 of my motor centers defined. So I have a lot of energy, but I didn't resonate with that for a very long time because I shut it all down.
Yep.
And I had to use it all up for things that felt like a struggle.
And again, redirecting our emotions into unhealthy things.
Yeah.
And then your desire motivation, which I am too.
Mm.
And you wrote, sent the message that following our desires is self-centered and that work life should be hard, which we just touched on. But yeah, the self-centered following desire. I mean, a lot of what I teach about is like, you need to be selfish. I mean, I'm a mom and I'm still telling moms, you need to be selfish. What would you say on desire?
Yeah, I now believe so wholeheartedly that what we desire, what we dream of, what we want at the core of our being was meant for us, because we wouldn't have those desires if they weren't meant for us. Like not everyone has the desire to start their own business and live on a farm and, X, Y, and Z. Other people want to live in a city. And it's so if you have these desires in your heart, you are meant to pursue them because they were meant for you. And so you're not meant to feel bad about them. You're not meant to try to fulfill other people's desires or other people's expectations of you. Your desires show you your path, and that will lead you to your purpose and your fulfillment. And we're here to feel fulfilled. We're here to follow our purpose. And so allowing myself to use my desires as a guidepost, and this comes back to my defined ego as well, allowing myself to follow what my heart is devoted to has been such a relief. Honestly, it's still really challenging for me, but even just admitting to myself what I want and taking the smallest steps in that direction, I mean, that's where I started. It changes everything.
And I should have started this with, again, your motivation is found on your chart. If you're on my website, it'll be on the written part. If you don't want to look up what the variable numbers mean, your motivation for us, it is desire. So that one hit home for me because I've always felt very much like that person who always desired more and desired. I mean, I'm also a Taurus, so it's like it's a lot of desire and whatnot. This has been one of the best conversations. And again, when we're talking about all of this doesn't mean that if you're an emotional authority, you're going to struggle with body image issues. No, this is about coming back to your chart, seeing what parts identify with you that we've talked about. And there could be a million ways that we take a look at this through your chart. So this is just like a little bit of a guidepost for you to start unpacking your own mental health, your own body image, whatever challenges you're going through, and really resourcing in healthier ways and letting yourself release what needs to be released. Thank you so much for all of this, Rachel. This has been so awesome. Where can people find you, listen to your podcast, all that good stuff?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I have loved this conversation with you. And everyone can find me at Intuitively Wild. That is the name of my brand and business. Intuitively Wild on Instagram, Intuitively Wild, the podcast, intuitivelywild.com. I have mentorships and online apothecary and a lot of more products and services coming out soon that I'm really excited about. But I would love to connect with anyone and everyone who feels inclined to reach out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Like 5 places.